Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bonnie Watson with the Telluride Foundation. Welcome to the Western Slope Critical Business Update call. This call happens every other Wednesday where we bring you critical resources to help you with your small business. So with that being said, we always just like to mention that this call is a collaboration from all sorts of entities across the state of Colorado. And without all of these entities working diligently on this call, we would not be able to bring you this content. And so a big shout out goes to Startup Colorado, Colorado SBDC, our Northwest, East, and Central Mountain regions, Grow SECO, Ogallala Commons, the Telluride Foundation, and the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Today we have a really great lineup for you. Like I always say, we always bring you these resource calls and think about what's the most important thing we could talk about. And as we're coming into the fall, as we're coming into winter, there's a lot of unknowns. And so, we really looked at it and said, let's look back at the summer and let's say, what have we learned? What have we done that we don't want to do again? What did we do that was successful? And what lessons can we take from this summer? And how can we take that in preparing for the fall? And so today we have Andrew Grossman, Director of Destinations with the Colorado Tourism Office. We'll hear from him for a few minutes. And then we also have a business panel that will be moderated by Kat Pappenbrock with OEdit. And she'll get to introduce our panel. And then we'll do a live Q&A at the very end for you to be able to ask this panel any of the questions that are just burning that you need to ask. And so we really encourage you guys to stay on, ask those questions. And then our very own Erin McCuskey with Northwest SBDC will go ahead and close us out. So with that being said, Kat, I'm going to hand it right over to you to introduce Andrew.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bonnie. It's my pleasure to introduce a colleague of mine at the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, Andrew Grossman, who is the new Destination Development Director for the Colorado Tourism Office. He joined the team back in April, so right in the middle of our COVID crisis, and was really thrown into the deep end in terms of managing, kind of the tourism messaging, and then now the destination development program as a lot of our rural communities kind of move through this and look at what's next for tourism. He came to us originally from Travel Oregon, and unfortunately he wasn't able to join us today because he's busy preparing for the governor's conference tomorrow. But he did do a little pre-recorded presentation for us about kind of what we've learned across the whole scope of the tourism landscape this summer. So with that, Bonnie, if you'll start him up. And looks like we're just having a little sound issue there. So maybe if we can start from the beginning, I think it's just a settings issue on our end.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and rewind here real quick.
Thanks for the introduction.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Kat, it's really wonderful to be joining you today. Sorry I can't be there in person or even be there live. There's a lot of existing conflicts we have this week as our team prepares to host its annual governor's conference on September 17th. For those of you that don't know, the Colorado Tourism Office is the destination marketing and management organization for the state of Colorado. The Colorado Tourism Office, we also call ourselves the CTO, is the division of the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, with a mission to drive traveler spending through promotion and development of compelling, sustainable travel experiences throughout our four-corner state. Our marketing team at the CTO does an incredible job of setting the expectation of the benefit of visiting Colorado. And what my team does is work with local partners on the ground to make sure that we can deliver on the expectation of the benefit to ensure that we're offering high-quality visitor experiences and inspire people to return. This year has been a really hard one for the tourism industry. It's really been a hard one for all of us, actually. And what the CTO has done to help really reconcile some of the impacts that we've been feeling is that as we moved into fiscal year 21, which started on July 1st, our wildly important goal, or WIG, as it's typically called, is to develop a crisis recovery plan for the industry. What that means is that everything that we do as an organization this year and likely the following years will level up to, in some way, shape, or form, recovery from COVID-19. One of the primary avenues through which we're trying to achieve this aspirational vision for a crisis recovery plan is that we developed a $3 million project that we then submitted to the U.S. Economic Development Administration as part of the CARES Act recovery assistance. And although it was a $3 million project, we were only able to submit a $2.4 million grant request due to these sort of match requirements. We're still in conversations with the EDA and are hopeful that we will be officially awarded that funding, but we won't know until later this year. But in the meantime, the work that my team does will be customized to support industry recovery. Many of you may be familiar with the Colorado Royal Academy for Tourism, also known as CRAFT, which is really our primary mechanism for engaging with local partners. As we prepare to sort of get ready to develop that crisis recovery plan, it's been an important opportunity for us to look back on and then really reflect on what's happened since March when the shutdowns really began to occur. Some of the major travel trends that we're seeing are that decision-making has changed. Some of that's been forced due to travel restrictions. So international travel is not really a thing, and domestic travel is also not really a thing right now. But really, even the way that people make decisions has changed. If you look at people's trip planning used to occur months in advance. Again, internationally, it would occur 5 months in advance or so. And domestic travel, at least from a flight perspective, would occur about 3 or so months in advance. Because of the way that we've had travel restrictions pop up and the outcome or results of social distancing, we're seeing people make decisions way faster. We're also seeing them be way more comfortable inside of their own passenger vehicle, which has really allowed us to really believe and sort of stand by the concept that 2020 has been the year of the road trip. And so a lot of you have sort of felt that in your rural destinations. At the same time, though, visitors are also seeking solace in the great vast outdoors. And another way to summarize the bullets on this slide are that I really believe that Colorado is sort of the epicenter of what the domestic travel market is looking for in the U.S. They're looking to be inside their cars to go to see the landscapes and stay socially distant from people on our public lands. This is likely why Colorado was voted the #1 road tripper destination by AAA back in July. And we're seeing a lot of changes in the way that people experience the state because of that. Along with that, though, in addition to sort of being the epicenter, we're seeing that recovery is happening disproportionately across the state. And sometimes we're seeing that some of the high-use destinations that sort of meet that visitor profile of scenic drives, public land, natural landscapes, those places are visitation's been returning, and at some points, again, higher than it has been in 2019. But that's not consistent across the board. Many other destinations are still struggling to recover their visitation. And with that, too, spikes in demand are changing. And one way to think about this is that, due to the high unemployment that's been happening, we're seeing more people travel throughout the week. So we're seeing kind of changes in visitor flows. But then we're also seeing, due to the increase of use on public land, we're seeing people want to move through our more rural destinations and their main streets at different times of the weekend than I think we typically see them otherwise. A big key, though, here is that although volume of visitors might be recovering or even exceeding what it was previously at different times, that does not inherently mean that previous visitor spending is back to where it used to be. A good way to think of it is that market share of tourism assets has changed. Although hotel occupancy is climbing back up to where it kind of previously was, we're still seeing market share of dispersed camping, private camping, rent by owner like Airbnb or HipCamp. We're seeing market share of those services go up, which is impacting the way the visitor spend is happening. I think just in the way that we're seeing overnights occur, we're seeing total spend per trip go down due to the lack of really spending on that hotel. We're also seeing things like indoor attractions sort of go down. And what that's really showcased as well is that there's an inherent risk of dependence on events for tourism revenue in our destinations. And the result of this is that I think it's easy to say that visitation may be returning, but collection of local lodging tax, which normally funds a lot of our local tourism organizations, the local DMOs, local chambers, that revenue is not recovered in the same way that we're seeing numbers of visitation recover, which has made budgets drop as well as staffing drop. So, resources are down while needs are up. And then it does sound like we're seeing some instances of sales tax recovering in a lot of different areas, but that doesn't have an inherent link to tourism. We're seeing sales seeing related to this, and I think a lot of this is focusing on opportunities for the coming fall as well as the coming winter, but in some ways, I think a lot of us are also thinking about how we could have done this summer better as we prepare for next summer. But regional collaboration, the more that we can share budgets, share direction, share projects, that's going to help us extend the limited resources that we have to have a larger impact, but also create a more consistent visitor experience for our travelers. I think we could talk about this one all day, but to increase the public land has really presented a lot of opportunities. We're seeing new users potentially become the next advocates for public land in Colorado, but we're also seeing an increase of wear and tear on the destinations that they're traveling to. And there's a need to basically engage with our land managers to create a stronger sense of shared stewardship of public land. As we're seeing visitor decision-making change, we're also seeing sort of demand there change. We need to be aligning the supply and promotion of tourism with the new demand that's happening in destinations. And along with that, I think there's a big shift that's starting to happen that's sort of needed right now, which is in addition to providing inspiration to travel, I think a lot of what we need to be incorporating as well is providing a lot of really good visitor information to support the types of tourism that we want to see, enhance responsible use of our lands, but also disperse people into areas that might be lesser visited. So what the Colorado Tourism Office has done since early April, once the lockdown started, we've had sort of 3 different marketing pushes. Initially, with the travel restrictions in place, our team did a really innovative and sort of groundbreaking campaign called the Wait, Ready, Set, Go campaign, which sort of set the stage for how different marketing tactics could be delivered depending on what sort of travel restrictions were in place, with the wait being stay at home, ready being in state, set being sort of domestic travel returning, and co really being international travel returning. That really provided the framework. And then in June, we were basically authorized to move into ready and start in-state marketing. We have not expanded into out-of-state marketing or even more so into international marketing. The bulk of our campaign work has been done in-state to date. And then looking ahead to this fall, we will continue to market in state, but we are launching our first ever fall campaign later this month. Some of the tactics that we've, again, been delivering through the current in-state marketing has been to bolster our Care for Colorado program. We really believe in Colorado as a sustainable tourism destination and have had a rich history of promoting responsible visitation through the Care for Colorado program. We've taken that platform and augmented it to include a lot of messaging about COVID-19 and how to really travel responsibly and patronize our destinations in a responsible way in the face of the current health crisis. A major piece of this is that we also launched a reopening section of Colorado.com that I would encourage all of the destinations in Colorado to participate in if you have not already done so. We do not believe right now in promoting destinations that have not authorized us to do so or provided consent. So there's a reopening section form submission that you can do to basically inform the CTO that you're ready to be promoted, and then we'll start promoting you. As part of that, we're also asking our partners to refresh Colorado trips. The way that people experience your destination has changed, and that needs to be reflected on Colorado.com. And that'll be something that we can serve up as part of the reopening section of our website. And then with that too, update business listings, work with your local businesses to do so, or even update related content on any destination level pages that we have. As we look towards the fall campaign, we are going to be prioritizing areas of need, whether that be geographical or sector-based. And then there's a huge focus on leveraging the existing content we have on Colorado.com to inspire earned media to help augment our voice. We're seeing a huge opportunity of leveraging Colorado.com. Really quickly, July 2020 traffic was up 13.7% over July 2019. We're seeing the COVID-19 alerts that we set up got more than 450,000 views since launching that in basically April. And then the reopening section has already gotten more than 100,000 clicks. So we're seeing our platform be something that visitors are looking for, and we want to partner with Colorado destinations to make sure that we are actively promoting it. I mentioned at the start that one of the reasons why I'm not able to be there today live is that we are preparing for our annual Governor's Conference. So a little bit of a shameless plug, if you've not already done so, the Governor's Conference is on September 17th, which is Thursday, and it is free, and we strongly encourage you to register. I know it's basically tomorrow, but we definitely hope to see you there. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks again, Kat, for the invitation, and look forward to staying in touch.
Great, and we thank Andrew for making the time there. Apologies for for some of the audio issues during the video. Um, rural sometimes with the upload speeds, it makes it a little bit variable. But let's hop on back to our presentation and we will get into our live panel. I'm super excited to take kind of some of those bigger themes that Andrew presented for the state and really drill them down to some of the things that we're really seeing on the western side of Colorado. And so with that, I would like to welcome our two panelists today. So first, Tessa Brader, who's the Director of Community Affairs and Destination Management at the Breckenridge Tourism Office. So definitely a full spectrum there from things that we've learned from travel as well as right down to the local business community. And then Steve Josephic, Deputy Director of the Grand Junction Economic Partnership, who's going to kind of give us some viewpoints from the outdoor recreation industry, both in terms of use, things that they've seen around Mesa County with their coalition, as well as some business insights. So with that, Tessa and Steve, let's pop you off. And I'd like to take just a minute for you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit further. Really kind of taking us into what was your regular day job pre-COVID and how has that shifted for you? What new roles or responsibilities have you taken on during COVID? And Tessa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Tessa Breeder, and I actually became the Director of Community Affairs and Destination Management for the BTO about a month before COVID hit. So safe to say I had not established any norms and definitely still have it today. And so it's definitely been baptism by fire. My past life was spent in politics, and since I had been in Colorado, I'd been overseeing the Breckenridge Welcome Center for the last few years. So gave me pretty unique insight for this particular role from a destination management perspective. And so I'd say as far as my core responsibilities and goals pre-COVID, they truly haven't changed that dramatically, but the tactics on delivering them have changed entirely. And so really just redoing how we're delivering, not necessarily the core responsibilities have really stayed the same, thankfully. And so while business outreach has certainly been one of those core duties of mine, it's definitely surpassed what we thought was once good communication. Canvassing almost every other week. Our newsletter went from our business facing, kind of community facing newsletter, went from going out once a week to 3 times a week. We've really expanded our local facing website, spent a lot more time on that, making sure basically our communication is as clear and as everywhere as it could possibly be during this time. We've also hosted a number of focus groups, making sure that we're getting enough major industries within Breckenridge, and really just trying to be as informed as possible going into winter, not knowing fully what that will look like.
Yeah, definitely. Steve, how about for you?
Oh, sure. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Josephic, the Deputy Director at the Grand Junction Economic Partnership, otherwise known as GJEP. And we're the EDC for Mesa County, so that's Grand Junction, Palisade, Fruita. And our primary role, I guess pre and during our COVID pandemic is job creation. We do have other economic development partners in the area that work along with us to help local businesses. And that was where a lot of our focus shifted once the COVID pandemic hit. There was a little bit of a turn away from the business recruitment because there was definitely a slowing with that when COVID hit. And we really needed to hunker down and help local businesses and make sure that they weren't going to be closing their doors. And if they were, then really doing what we can to support them and do what we can to get their doors back opened in a short period of time. And I think our community has been fairly fortunate, and we've seen lesser of an impact in our community than the rest of the state and definitely the rest of the country. So I think we're in a pretty fortunate space right now. But it's still focusing on local businesses, primarily looking at supply chain issues, which has been one of the biggest hits for a lot of the businesses. So just trying to find other ways to get supplies and products to these businesses, as well as helping businesses find creative ways to utilize their equipment and their staff to do other things that might be able to help keep their doors open. So it's been an interesting time, but so far so good. You know, we're staying optimistic and positive, and we think that we're going to be coming out of this relatively soon, and a lot sooner than some of the other downturns we've had in the past. So
great. So exciting to always hear kind of a positive attitude as we kind of continue to navigate all of this, right? So the big question, right? The theme of today, how did summer go? Kind of heading into summer, you know, knowing that we had that really basically closure time in kind of March and April. How did you set expectations based on what happened there? What were some of the pivots that you used to adapt to those? And what were some of the outcomes that you saw? Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
Sure. Well, it was really interesting when COVID first hit. We had the phase 1 stay-at-home order that was recommended by the governor, and really a lot of the businesses got scared in the community, and most people throughout the state, they were ordered to stay at home unless you were working in an essential business. So here you have all of these people working remotely, some just not working at all. And then one of the few things that we were allowed to do and actually recommended to do was recreate outdoors, mostly for mental stability and just kind of keeping people sane, because they're getting sick and tired of sitting around their homes all the time. So we see this huge spike of people recreating. And what we noticed in Mesa County was that, and I'm sure a lot of other rural and mountain towns saw this as well, was that a lot of those people from the high density urban areas were traveling to the more rural places of the country and recreating pretty heavily in our backyards, which was a little scary for us because our COVID numbers were low and relatively stable compared to the rest of the state. And all of a sudden we see just all these unfamiliar faces and cars and license plates at our most popular trailheads. So we had this a little bit of a boom with people coming into our community to utilize the trails, because if you remember, right around the start of COVID, that's typically the start of the desert season, when people are getting sick and tired of the snow. Sometimes there's a little bit of muddy weather in their area, so they come to the desert to recreate. Mountain biking is hugely popular in Mesa County, so we saw a big surge of people. And what was interesting is not only were they recreating in our more popular areas, but places that usually saw little to no traffic. Rabbit Valley is a perfect example of that. Was completely overrun by tourists, and it was a little disturbing to see, just because there were so many people filling that area up that all the campsites were being taken, and people were just parking and setting up tents just out in the brush, and it's a pretty sensitive area out there. So it was interesting to see all of that happen, kind of all at once. I sit on the Outdoor Rec Coalition board. That's a local outdoor rec group for Mesa County, and we just kind of help to promote and identify the outdoor rec industry in this area. And we put together a informative video, just trying to, I guess, politely ask people to recreate responsibly and adhere to the recommended stay-at-home policy, and try to stay within your local community when you're looking to recreate. Just because our community is only so big, our hospitals only have so many beds in them. So that was kind of our reaction, and really the best thing that we could do, because there was no law, so to speak, to prevent people from coming into our community. And there's really no enforcement that we could do at the time. And that the video that we put out, it was taken in a good way. Not really sure how effective it was, but right around that time, things started to warm up, as far as temperature goes in our community. So the desert season slowly tapers. We, as a state, moved into phase 2. More and more communities moved into phase 2. So a lot of those crowds were slowly being dispersed throughout the rest of the state. And the impact that we saw initially was slowly kind of spreading out throughout the state. So we all had a great big sigh of relief throughout our community as that was happening. And then other communities started to see what we had gone through. So that was the kind of the big start to the middle part of our summer. And what we saw and kind of what we saw from some of the outcomes of COVID coming into our community, getting into the manufacturing side of things. I mentioned it earlier, supply chain. That was a great big issue in the area. We had certain manufacturers or sales and distribution operations that were waiting for product to be manufactured overseas, and all that was stuck. It was on hold, so these businesses, some of them had to lay off some employees and shut their doors for a short period of time until a lot of that product was freed up, reopen their doors, get the products out to the customers that have been waiting for them, and then kind of move forward as business usual. And a lot of the businesses that we spoke with, they actually ended up having record-setting months in the history of their businesses once all their shipments were received, and there was such a high demand coming from the customers. So there was just this kind of roller coaster ride with our local businesses, just worrying, wondering what they should do, and then they get their product and all is good. But it was just a really interesting and kind of scary time. But right now, a lot of those companies are in their second wave of having sold out of their products, and they're waiting for more to come in. So once again, supply chain issues are still an issue, but we've been working with these businesses to slowly help them find other means of income until that next wave of product comes in. Oh, Kat, you're on mute.
Yep, I was. Thank you. One of these days I'll remember how to get off of mute for these. So thanks for those insights, and definitely really sounded like Junction was kind of hit with some of those impacts pretty early, not necessarily public health, but in terms of the crowds. Now we usually think of Breckenridge as a winter destination, but summer has really become a prime season there. So Tessa, why don't you let us know how did summer kick off in Breckenridge? When did it kick off? And what were some of the things that you learned throughout the season?
Yeah, definitely a learning experience. And I'd say in short, it went as well as we could have possibly hoped for. Like everyone, we were really teetering on the edge of wanting visitation and to support our businesses. But of course, public health being everyone's absolutely top concern and wanting to keep our very small community safe. So it was definitely a constant conversation and still is. So I'd say we shut down the welcome centers about everybody else kind of in mid-March, and that kind of set the tone, a little bit of a domino effect as other things pretty much closed up the same weekend. And so kind of from that initial kind of closure point is when our office, the tourism office, in alignment with the town of Breckenridge, organized the recovery committee. And this was very specifically to address a lot of those initial shutdown issues and questions. And we're very lucky to have a town council, many of the members of whom own businesses in town and were impacted by this in multiple ways, but very much on the front lines of it. And so we were able to put together a recovery committee that consisted of multiple nonprofits in the area, activity vendors, open space and trails, town officials, like I said, our office, of course, arts district, all sorts of things. And so we really tried to have input from every single corner, again, to make as informed decisions as we possibly could with limited knowledge. And so that really set the tone, and that was where our initial ideas for Walkable Maine came from. And the idea behind that was truly in the beginning, not only to support business, but more than anything, supporting public health and allowing distancing on Main Street safely. And so our walkable Main Street will actually come to an end in a couple of weeks, since we won't be able to do it with all of our snow come winter, but that was definitely a conversation. But with that being said, we've really moved now, thankfully, from that recovery committee and really dealing with those initial kind of emergency issues to now really morphing into a resiliency committee and planning much more for the long term now that we're really over that initial hump, or so we hope we are. And so and this went back to the business communication also. We essentially ran a poll because the Walkable Main was supposed to be a very short kind of 4-week trial. And after seeing what a success it was, both from the distancing measures and that our businesses were really, really happy with it, we took a poll of businesses and it overwhelmingly came back that they wanted to extend it essentially as long as possible. And so that is how we ended up with Walkable Main, which has been a great success overall. And I think even a lot of the businesses that were really unsure in the beginning, I think everyone was really pleasantly surprised with how it played out. And so the other part of that, again, goes back to we really upped our communication on this and ensured that the businesses were feeling heard throughout this entire process, because we, as a tourism office, did not want to be welcoming or bringing any visitation that was not going to be welcomed by our community here. So those things really had to be in alignment. And so the in-town dispersion messaging really helped. And also we established a mandatory mask zone in town because that had been, I'm sure like many of you, had been a constant conversation upon reopening of how are we going to keep our frontline workers safe, and we don't want them to be taking the brunt of any guest frustration with the masks if that's not something they're used to. And so it was a really cohesive effort between the recovery committee, town council, just about everyone, in trying to alleviate the stress of putting that on the frontline workers. And so we instituted a mandatory mask zone downtown and almost instantly solved the problem. We had put about 200 signs in the downtown area, just essentially politely asking people to wear their masks, which was relatively effective, but the mandatory mask zone made it much more effective. And so that's something we actually just extended and we'll be going into the winter with. And we've actually been surprised, not only did that alleviate that issue for the businesses and for those frontline workers to have those conversations with their customers, but it also, we were really pleasantly surprised that guests came back and said, we can't tell you how happy we are to be here and how safe we feel. This is not the environment that we have at home, and we're really glad that it's an environment here that's enforced. And so we were really pleasantly surprised with the success of that, I think, since that was one of our biggest fears upon reopening. And I'd say it was kind of funny because 4th of July is both kind of our kickoff weekend and our biggest weekend of summer. And so I think when we safely got through the 4th of July, we all kind of took a little bit of a breath that we weren't rushed through it, we weren't overrun, and there was a pleasant amount of business that or traffic that the businesses were really happy, but everyone felt safe, which was our ultimate goal in all of this. So I'd say those were definitely our biggest lessons from summer.
And so good to hear that, you were able to basically, sort of manage traffic by just taking a little bit of extra time at the beginning at the behest of the community and feeling safe and being able to kind of watch what was happening elsewhere and kind of adapt on the fly, which is just incredible. So Tessa, on the next one, when a lot of times when we talk about marketing, whether it's marketing a business or marketing a destination, you always have that hook, you have that event, or you have something that you're really building the expectation for visitors to come and experience. I know when we were talking earlier this week, I really loved that concept of delight and surprise that you implemented in Breckenridge and how that sort of shifted visitors' expectations. Can you talk a little bit about that and what sort of the guest experience was? And then also maybe just a little piece of if you also also had issues with kind of public land use or pressures at all this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Breckenridge was very specifically a little late to re-enter the marketing game intentionally. Again, we were really directly taking that feedback from our community and did not want to be bringing guests here if our community did not feel ready for that. So those things really had to be in alignment. And so with that being said, when we were kind of slowly starting to reopen, we took the approach of delight and surprising as far as activations and activities go. So within Walkable Maine, we actually had live music playing very regularly throughout different parts of the day, and different arts projects, all sorts of things, different arts installations. And the idea being, if you happen to already be here, then this was an extra activation for you to enjoy, but we did not advertise these activations anywhere in our marketing. And so it was really just meant as an enhancement if you were already here, but not meant to draw anybody here specifically for those activities. And so our marketing team, I think, really struggled, since marketers want to market. And of course, we kind of had to unlearn, our entire business is about putting out these activities to draw people in. And so the idea that we really had to change that focus, at least temporarily, was definitely a little bit strange. And so we really tried to, our Walkable Main Street kind of has our central plaza, which is right next to the Welcome Center, which is with or without Walkable Main is the busiest part of Main Street. And so we really tried and communicated with our events committee who oversaw this program to really try to activate the quieter parts of Main Street, and really just going with that dispersion technique. And so I think our biggest activations within Walkable Main were really on the far north end and the far south end, which are typically the two that see the least amount of traffic. So all of that was very much kind of by design and a little bit of trial and error of watching it and how it was functioning. And so on top of this, we've also really upped our education. And this is something that had been very high up in our priorities even before COVID, but really upping our frontline education so that they know not to be sending hikers to Quandary the next morning, as that's probably not going to be your most distanced option. And so part of this was going along with that communication piece, dispersing activities and making sure that people are aware of all of those other options and all of the other things there are to do. And so with that being said, we also worked with our open space and trails locally. There were actually a couple of trails that were just finished this summer that were essentially on no one's radar that we helped push people to in place of some of those more popular ones. And I'm sure, like many of you have seen, trash is definitely up in single use and all of that with all of the new public health requirements. And so, well, I'd say we didn't necessarily see more traffic on the trails. I think we did see more trash just because trash is up in general. And so playing that education piece and really trying to, through our Welcome Center and through educating other frontline workers, really trying to be stewards and educational hosts of our guests, so to say, since, as many of you know, they want to do it the right way and a lot of times don't know. And so that education piece is really so important and something we've really tried to prioritize. As far as, say, we did see a little bit more, and just on a trend note, we did see a little bit more of the longer stay, but the shorter booking window. So as people were a little bit more hesitant to book, wanting to book a little bit closer to when they're actually going to be arriving, we noticed their length of stay was actually a little bit longer due to, options to remote work now, or kids not necessarily going back to traditional classrooms. And so we're really looking at how to educate kind of potentially this new group that is coming in as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Tessa. And I know just, my former role was in the tourism world, and, those kind of longer term education and sustainability plans have been in place in Breckenridge for such a long time. So it was really amazing to see those shift this summer to be able to work for COVID. So Steve, I know when we chatted earlier this week, you had a couple of interesting, like kind of individual business stories. One that really kind of connected around the supply chain issue and how both of them were dealing with them just based on their base business model, right? So we've had a lot of business panels where, you know, we have these very individual pieces where you see like sometimes how your business is set up affects kind of how you had to adapt for COVID, right? And so these are for our bike rack manufacturers. And then for Leitner Poma, how they're kind of adjusting going into winter. And then finally, one of those trends that you had brought up around consumers, how they're sort of shifting to go back to that trend of being a little bit more local.
You bet. Yeah, we're pretty fortunate to have a couple of bike rack manufacturers in our community. And it's been interesting to see the difference between the two because they have different business operations, same end product, but just getting it in a couple different ways. Rocky Mounts, they are the first I'm going to mention, and they relocated here from Boulder not too long ago. So welcome them into the community, and they have been doing well pre-COVID. And then when COVID hit, they were expecting a large shipment to come in from overseas because they outsource a lot of their work. In Grand Junction, their operation is more of a sales distribution and warranty, which is completely, that's typically how most businesses operate here in the States. And when COVID hit, their large spring shipment was delayed. So they were just not really sure what to do. The owner of the company ended up closing their doors for a short period of time, thinking this would be better for their employees because they can collect unemployment. They can get the additional kickbacks from the government that they were layering upon their normal unemployment benefits. So that was good for the employees, not so good for the business. But eventually, the shipment arrived. And once their shipment arrived, it all came at once, and they had a brand new problem. The facility that they are in wasn't quite large enough to store all of the equipment that came all at once. Bike racks, they take up a lot of room. So they had this brand new problem of not being able to store all of their equipment. And then bringing all their employees back in, they eventually got their product out the door. And they ended up having a record-breaking, I believe it was May or June, but they had a record-breaking month, the greatest in the history of their company, and they've been around for over 20 years. And all due to this supply chain issue that they had. So it ended up being a great experience in the end. But super interesting to see what they had to go through in order to get their product out the door and kind of how that ended up. The other business was a local startup, and they're also manufacturing their bike racks. They're called Quicker Stuff, and brand new on the market, and they are manufacturing all of their bike racks in-house, Grand Junction made. So when COVID hit, kind of a scary time to be a startup company, but luckily they had all their ducks in a row, and they were sourcing all of the vast majority of their equipment locally in order to manufacture their goods. And I actually just spoke with the owner just this morning. He popped into our office, and he said that they have been forced to stop their sales because they can't keep up with the demand of auto racks right now, because auto racks, especially hitch-mounted auto racks, are in incredibly high demand right now because during the start of the pandemic, people had their stimulus checks sent to them. Everyone's recreating outside. What do? If you're really into the outdoors, you're going to upgrade your equipment, maybe buy something new, dust off the old 26-inch mountain bike, get some new rubber on there, and get a new rack to take it to the trailhead. So the sales in that very specific market has been incredibly profitable for these businesses. And I think Quicker Stuff, he must have had a crystal ball in order to get into this industry just as COVID was hitting, because they're doing incredibly well right now, and just looking for ways to expand, bring in new equipment, more employees, and kind of grow their new startup business, which is doing great. So pretty interesting to see two different businesses, one offshoring their manufacturing, one producing locally, both ending up doing fairly well. And it's just it was pretty exciting to see and pretty nerve-wracking at the same time. And another unexpected shift, Kat, like you mentioned earlier with Leitner Poma, they're one of the world's largest manufacturers of chairlifts and other devices that require cables to move people. They have trolley systems in airports all around the country, and they don't do just chairlifts. Pretty interesting business. But they have had some very large contracts with major U.S. ski resorts, and a lot of their contracts were put on hold because the ski resorts had to pump their brakes a little bit with the unforeseeable future with COVID. Most of them had to shut down early last season. They're not sure what it's going to look like going into this new season with ticket sales. So any unnecessary spending, they ended up canceling or just postponing contracts with Leitner Poma. And instead of laying off employees, closing doors, anything like that, Leitner Poma decided to get creative and reach out to just pretty much any industry throughout the U.S. to find projects to help utilize their employees' talent and the machinery that they have throughout their manufacturing facility. So they've been connecting with Manufacturers Edge. They sent out an ad through Company Week locally in here in Colorado, and then just other guerrilla marketing schemes just to drum up more business. And it's just small one-off projects that they have, which is very unlike what they're used to, but I think it was really good for them to stay flexible and accept some of these smaller projects to help keep everybody working, which is really great to see. And they're still in that process right now. I'm just trying to fill in some gaps that they have, but it is working. And finally, to touch on the consumer trends that we've seen, well, with the supply chain disruption, it's really affected availability of products. We've all seen it. You jump online to go shopping for something, and everyone's sold out of certain key items, especially hitch-mounted bike racks, apparently. And we're starting to see people trend towards shopping locally at their local brick and mortar outdoor gear shops, bike shops. And we're really hoping that this trend is going to stick even after the pandemic goes away, and the people are going to see the value of going to a local shop, getting the customer service, getting the warranty repair. They might be paying full retail, a little bit more than the deals that they could find shopping through the internet. But I think they're seeing the value of shopping locally. So we're really hoping to see that trend stick and see our local retailers in the area stay around and pick up some longtime customers.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's probably one of the best positive outcomes of COVID and making us stick close to home is that we get to discover what we have right next door and really support it. So to kind of wrap this up, Steve, I'm going to start with you for our final question. We'll start with sort of the downside first and the upside second. So what's the one thing that, either for you or for the businesses locally that you work with kind of continues to challenge you as you're looking into fall, winter, next year? And then what's the one kind of, adaptation or silver lining out of this? And you may have already said it already, but if so, it totally bears repeating, that you see wanting to kind of move forward and being good moving forward out of and through COVID.
Yeah, well, the main uncertainty is just not knowing if we're going to have another spike. A lot of these businesses, they're not going to be able to withstand that. So it's really important that everybody is careful, following the guidelines for social distancing and sanitization. That's hugely important, I think, for all of our communities. And I guess one thing is that the businesses are going to be much better prepared if we do go through another spike because they've been through this before. They know the protocol. They know what funding options there are. There are hopefully going to be other funding options that we see. because the last thing our local businesses need is to increase their debt. So what we'd like to see from the government is more grant opportunities, more loan forgiveness for any loans that might be existing right now. I think that would be hugely beneficial to the companies. But that's really just the big scary thing that's creeping under your bed right now. So I really hope that things take a turn for the positive there and just keep trending the way that they are. And as far as opportunities go for our community, things that we can do from what we've experienced, the first thing I started talking about earlier today was the huge spike that we had with our crowding of trailheads and trails with people visiting this area. So I think just education is going to be a big part of it, just to help sustain our local trail systems and just have people recreate responsibly. I mean, we're getting back to just trail etiquette and leave no trace. And I think a lot of people really need to be reminded of that, especially with the newer generation, newer users who are using COVID as an excuse to finally get out and get some exercise. Those people might have been kind of left out of these conversations when they got back to recreating outdoors. So I really think that educating the public to help protect our natural spaces is huge, because like most mountain communities and rural areas, outdoor recreation economy is hugely based on what's in our backyard. So if people aren't recreating responsibly, then it's not gonna, we're all gonna lose. I don't know any other way to say that. So that's just something I'd really like to stress. And as far as opportunities go, I think we're seeing possibly maybe some onshoring from our manufacturers. So businesses that have been sending their equipment to get manufactured overseas, maybe they're going to see the benefits of and less vulnerability if they start manufacturing here in the States. Anything to create jobs and keep everything local is, it might be a little bit more expensive for them, but it might be worth it in the long run.
Awesome. Thanks for those insights. And before I toss it to Tessa, I just wanted to remind all of our participants that if you do have any questions that you want to ask of them specifically, just to go ahead and pop them into Q&A. And we'll I think we've got a couple little minutes left after Tessa's done before we get into our resources. So Tessa, same question to you. What's your biggest challenge, and what's kind of one of those adaptations that sort of comes to mind as you head into fall, winter, or the future?
Yeah, definitely. This is going to sound a little bit familiar, but I'd say mental health and stamina is probably, and just uncertainty about winter in general is probably our biggest challenge at this point. As most of you know, living in a mountain town is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, even when there is not a pandemic. And so holding on to seasonal workers, all of those things, and really creating an environment that's really made for longevity, I think kind of our biggest challenge, definitely that existed before the pandemic, but I think has been really brought to light even more so now. And I'd say kind of on that same premise, we've also been really lucky that kind of when guests started coming out of the woodwork, everyone was very understanding. Everyone expected things to be weird. Everyone expected the protocols to be different from where they came from to where they were visiting. And so there was a great deal of understanding, and it's okay. And I think as the summer's gone on, we've seen a little bit less of that as people are kind of trying to move maybe a little bit back into normal. And so I'd say keeping our community really mentally healthy while also looking at potentially less understanding guests as we get a little bit further into this could be challenges. And that's something we're really building out with our group called Building Hope Summit County, which is specifically for mental health resources. And so that's something we've kind of made a subcommittee from our resiliency committee to really look at ways employers can try to address employees' mental health things that they could be providing them, opportunities they may not even be aware existed. So we're really trying to do it both from kind of a top-down and a bottom-up approach on that. And then I would say biggest opportunity kind of going with that is our education program, which kind of feeds into the sustainability programs as well. So we have an overarching program called One Breckenridge that both, it's kind of two-sided. One part of it does experiential learning for frontline workers, and the other side of it does guest service and communication training. So one side of it is kind of learning the products, and the other side of it is learning how to communicate those products and speak to your guests. And so we've really built that out the last few years, and right now it definitely has the most steam and attention it's ever gotten, just because this is so top of mind for everyone right now on kind of a municipal level. And so we'll be kicking off that program really in November, but that'll be kind of all parts of it. So guest service training, experiential learning, and all of our partners kind of weigh in on that. So open space and trails, telling us which trails they want people promoting this season. The Heritage Alliance, letting us know what new offerings they're doing with historical offerings, things like that. So really taking a really large or overarching approach to education and sustainability, and really thinking bigger than just environment, but kind of culturally and all of those things. And kind of the hope is that kind of the education piece with all of that being built in will also help us keep our community members more long-term, look at less seasonal turnover, and really try to integrate people into Breckenridge. So I'd say that's biggest challenges and opportunities at this moment in time. Probably will change tomorrow with how fast things are going right now.
Exactly. And that's sort of the theme of this year, right? You plan and then you plan again. And so I know we've done some scenario planning in the past on these calls, and I know we're constantly updating ours all the time. But Tessa and Steve, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. We actually didn't have any Q&A come in, but we did have kind of a cool comment from Jillian, one of our participants, who has an online Aspen marketplace talking about going hyper-local, where they're bringing in and selling hand-selected Colorado-made specialty goods. So we'll make sure I'll pop that out to all of the panelists. And sounds like she may be connecting with you, Tessa, offline on a visit that she'll be doing to Breckenridge soon. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Erin to wrap us up with some additional resources. And thank you all for being on.
Thank you all. That was very insightful. Really appreciate it. So a couple kind of key updates that we want our small business owners to know about in regards to the Energize Colorado Gap Fund, which you've likely heard about. The application is closed right now. Round 1 just closed, but don't worry, you will still have an opportunity to submit either for the first time or to submit again if you don't receive funding. Round 2 is scheduled to be open for applications October 5th through October 19th. So keep pulling together your financials if you haven't already applied for that. There will be 4 rounds total. Each will distribute $5 million. It's not a first come, first serve. Within each round, the quality of your application really matters. Also on the screen, you'll see information about the Colorado COVID Legal Relief Group. That's a group of lawyers throughout Colorado who are providing pro bono legal support to help small businesses who are navigating COVID-19 challenges, such as lease evictions, other types of contract negotiations. Please check out that website and contact them for that free support. It's a tremendous resource. Last screen here, there's a lot of information here, and I'm not going to go through each one individually, but I wanted to put some topics up on the screen just to give you an idea of the depth and breadth of information that's available out there for small business owners. So just within the next week, you can see some of the topics that I saw that I thought personally would be really interesting. Also, the SBDC has a tremendous calendar of on-demand webinars as well as topics that are upcoming, including things along the lines of e-commerce marketing solutions, Shopify for beginners, marketing for socially distanced shopping. There's an on-demand cash flow essentials course that you can work through at your own pace that includes downloads with worksheets that you can actually go apply to your business. So tons of tremendous information and resources out there. Check out some of these that are coming up. I really think that people are starting to dial in on how we can best support our small businesses through this time. You can find out more at coloradosbdc.org. Our next call is going to be in 2 weeks. Sorry, I skipped one slide, but you can find all of our recordings on the Choose Colorado YouTube channel, as well as on the Telluride Foundation website and the Northwest SBDC website. Thanks again to our partners at the Office of Economic Development and International Trade and at Startup Colorado. But finally, we'll see you in 2 weeks, September 30th at 1 p.m. We don't have our topic set up yet for that week. So if there's something that you think would be very relevant, something that you want to hear about, please send an email to the team at Startup Colorado and let us know what you would like to hear about. Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.